I'm a strong believer in API first design. So when you come up with new capabilities, our managed BOM tool, for example, have it as an API. It keeps your separation from your business logic and your client. And if you get your API, your interface right, you've got a clean system to start with that your own UI, your own interfaces can sit on top of. And that separation is natural. And then customers, the first question they say is, this looks great in the UI. How do I access the same data programmatically because I want to connect it into my systems? And you've got an answer there. So yeah, API first is definitely a thing. And I would say that on top of that, we're now in an AI world. We're now in a world where it's important that your APIs are discoverable not just by humans but by machines. And those LLMs that come in and talk to us via MCP servers, they want to know the kind of questions that humans want to ask, but they do this automatically. So it's imperative, I think, to stay to provide an API that is consumable by all sorts of clients.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Altium OnTrack Podcast. I'm your host, Zach Peterson. Today, we're talking with Rob Barton, Head of Platform API at Altium. I've talked to a lot of folks out there who are very interested in the API through Nexar, and now there is a new version of this API that I think is going to excite quite a lot of listeners out there. So I'm very happy to talk to Rob today. Rob, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Zach. It's an honor to meet you and a privilege to be this side of the camera this time. So thank you for having me on your podcast.
I like being on that side of the camera occasionally as well, so I get it. That very happy you're here, and I think it's a really good time for you to show up because I feel like right now there's a lot of folks out there who are kind of tinkering around with different tools that they want to use to add on to Altium, and this is going to be like the perfect thing that's going to enable that. So yeah, very very perfect timing for you to come on and talk with me.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, and I think you're right about the timing on the industry. We get a lot of attention, a lot of questions about, when's programmatic access going to become available. So hopefully I can add some light onto that today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, before we talk about, what's happening with the API, just if you could, since you are a new guest, just give us a quick introduction to yourself. Tell us about your background and how you got involved in electronics.
Yeah, sure. Well, like most people, it wasn't a straight line path into where I am today. So I started off studying physics. So I thought I was going to be a physicist way back when. So I did a degree in physics, went on to do some research in physics. So at a small experimental lab called CERN over in Switzerland. And that was really interesting. So that was a physics experiment trying to discover a new state of matter. They had something like a petabyte of data. So I spent a lot of time learning to code basically to work through the kind of event stream and to analyze the data. So that's when I learned to program. And then in about 2001, I joined a company called Unigraphics Solutions, who became UGS, who became EDS, who became Siemens PLM Software, who became Siemens Digital Industry Software. So as I'm sure you know, they are purveyors of Teamcenter and NX as their flagship desktop PLM and CAD systems. I spent about 15 years there, and I think that's where I really learned kind of the art of software engineering, working with multidisciplinary teams, working across time zones, and sort of really learning the art of software. So that was a core part of my career. Fast forward to January 2017, I joined Dassault Systems, also here in Cambridge, and they were building a product called Make by Me. So this is a 3D design software and mobile app. It's CAD in the cloud, so this was part of the shift from desktop into cloud, and it allows users to design and share digital projects in a community, before they kind of buy those materials. So that was fun, my first real foray into cloud. And then in 2020, I was contacted by a chap called Lee Gorn, who at the time was CTO for Altium. And Lee explained that he wanted to spin up a new office in Cambridge. He wanted to start a new business unit called Nexar. here. And his mission was to essentially democratize and modernize electronics and bring that into the cloud. So, he explained that at that time, a lot of data was being exchanged with things like Gerber files and spreadsheets and email. So I could tell straight away there was rife for an opportunity to make a really big difference in electronics. So I was excited to hear what he had to say and join.
So Lee has been on the podcast in the past with Judy Warner, and we'll probably link that episode in the description if you're watching on YouTube. And if he's listening, open invitation, come back on and talk to us. So you came over to Altium. At the time you came over to Altium, it sounds like it was kind of right at that stage where Altium was maybe pivoting to become a little more cloud focused. Would you say that's fair?
I think that's very fair. So, this is only a few years after 2016, which I think was a real pivotal year for the company. So 2016 saw, the birth of Altium 365, it saw the acquisition of Octopart. So there was a real kind of pivot to the cloud at that point. So yeah, I was excited. I was in number 2 into Cambridge, and I could just see the ambition and the potential here. And it was a pleasure to kind of support Lee growing this business unit.
Yeah, and I think whenever, I remember back at that time, whenever you would encounter a cloud solution for something, whether it's business or engineering or whatever, you'd always find this little tab on the top of the company website, API, right? And that's your programmatic access that you're mentioning. So if you could give us kind of an overview of what's been happening with the API access through the cloud to, let's say, Altium services more generally.
Yeah, that's a great question. So really, the mission of the Nexar business unit was to reinvent the business of electronics. So it was a powerful cloud-based API that was being introduced. So the idea was to democratize information, bring people together, and just allow everybody to be more connected, to be more efficient, to make smarter business decisions. So at the time, there really wasn't much going on. And if I show you the API evolution, what we have here is kind of the history of the API from those really early days and just before to where we are today with the platform API. So before Nexar was kind of conceived, there were a number of different disconnected systems in Altium that the users could connect into. It wasn't easy. There were some kind of issues. There were some hurdles to get going. Documentation wasn't always necessarily where it should be, where you'd expect it to be today. And because there were so many different systems, it was then kind of hard to get big traction. There were Altium Vault SDK, for example. I've not really seen this, but I know that Altium Vault is a tooling that really kind of powers all of the data that is in A365 and Altium Designer today. And there was some SDK that allowed you, if you put the effort in, to get connected into that. There was also a Nexus SDK and an AFS SDK, and all these different things. And some of them use really old technology like SOAP, or they were kind of RESTful at best. And over on the Octopart side, similarly, there was a single kind of RESTful API that allowed you some access into supply data. So it was very kind of disconnected, not really kind of joined up. And Nexar's mission was to kind of solve that, so to bring everything together.
Now, I think a lot of folks will probably be familiar with Nexar more through the Spectra brand, which was the I think suite of data and research reports and products and that kind of thing. But Nexar, was it supposed to be kind of this back end underlying thing that just kind of weaved through all the products at some point naturally? Was that kind of the vision for long term?
That's right. Nexar was supposed to be this platform that basically our product sat on top of. So it was kind of a platform layer that would connect to the data underneath and user data as well as kind of public supply data, but all those business logic and business services. And it would abstract that away into an API and an SDK. And you're absolutely right. On the back of that, you could then build other products like Spectra. So Spectra's interesting. That is a data intelligence product. It's supply chain business intelligence that offer actionable insights. So if you're a procurement professional, if you are you want competitive intelligence as a supplier or as a manufacturer, then even today we can provide some kind of Spectra reports and tooling that allow you to do that. So it was the first of a kind of series of intelligent tools that the company is building, should we say.
Sure. Now, as we kind of go through this progression that you have here on screen, right? Initial focus on supply and design happens in 2021, but kind of as you move forward into, say 2023, you have BOM intelligence, which is also this element of supply. And that was kind of my impression early on too, was that most of the focus was on supply chain, enabling people to get data off of Octopart, that kind of thing, to enable these other services. And that's been the focus for quite a long time. What kind of drove the switch between, just doing supply data and then actually doing something with design data?
That's a good question. I think with Nexar originally, it was conceived that there were these three pillars, right? There was supply, there was design, and there was manufacturing, and they're all interconnected. If you are going to manufacture your board, you need to design it first, and you need to get those components. So, as you're designing a board, you want to have faith that the components you're choosing will still be available. They'll still be, supported. And if you're a manufacturer, you care about which of your parts are being included in designs, so that you can make sure that there's enough kind of supply for them. So this whole, I think it was described as like a data flywheel, was these kind of interconnected pillars. And Nexar was supposed to, be the underpinning all of this information. So you could kind of connect into the platform and you could do all of those things. You could work on the design. You were cognizant of what was happening on the supply chain, and you were connected to manufacturing services as well. So yeah. But you're right. It started off with a focus on supply and design. So we had a bit of a foot up with the Octopart API already. That was then converted to GraphQL and then included in Nexar. Whereas design really was written from scratch. So there was a great developer called Roman Kuzmin he joined very shortly after me, and he's basically spent the first couple of years just building out the design API. So that was his key focus. So yeah, you're right. Fast forward 2021, 2022, we've now got an API. It has a supply and a design aspect to it. And we were looking at things like manufacturing services and adding Spectra data intelligence.
Now, looking here at 2024 on this timeline, right, it says platform API formed from the Nexar fork, right? So it sounds like there's this split between what was happening with the original Nexar API and then now this new thing, which we call the platform API.
Yes, that's exactly right too. So Nexar was somewhat independent. It was allowed to spin up very quickly and independently. And it got to it got a certain distance. So, you can sign up to it today, you can connect into it, and it's quite easy to connect into that data, but it has some limitations. So for example, it's not SOC 2 compliant. It sits outside that SOC 2 boundary, which Altium 365 services sit inside. It's also not available in all the realms as well. So you can't access it on cloud. You can't access it in GovCloud. Sorry, you can access it in cloud. You can't access it in GovCloud. You can't access it on-prem. It is just clouds only. Which obviously, customers that want an on-prem version of this, or they are sitting in GovCloud, are then limited. So Platform API gives us that extra boost, that extra kind of acceleration into the market and into users that can access the data here. It's also, because the platform is sitting inside our Altium 365 infrastructure, there's a lot more for support for things like DevOps and security and monitoring tools as well. So it's like the big brother. It's like a grown-up version of the API that's going to the next level.
Now, when you say things like DevOps and security, I think a lot of people associate those terms with enterprise users, right?
Mhm.
Is that who this is for, or is this something that anybody can access?
That is also a great question. So the original mission from Nexar was that it was to democratize the API. So you can sign up and anybody can use it. And what we actually found is, a lot of small companies would be connecting in to get supply data. This is part of their process for, procuring bombs. You don't have to be a large company to do this. But over on the design side, most of the interest was things like, can I do some analysis on my PCB? So this is, really bigger kind of initiatives. Can I do library management, that sort of thing? So there's more of a sway on the enterprise side, and I think that's really where the focus of Platform API is now. That's where we see the value as a company is the bigger customers and the larger enterprises that can really connect in and make the customization changes that they need for the API.
Okay, so democratization really does mean democratization. It's something that, any kind of innovator could come in and build something on top of Altium and, really expose all of the, let's say, all the design data in their 365 instance to some application that they're building, let's say.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think, I would clarify that we're still kind of figuring out what the pricing model is going to be, what the access is going to be right now. So, I think the focus will be on those larger enterprises in general, but there's definitely value there in the long tail as well, and those kind of mid-sized enterprises. So I think we'll see, and we've seen that with Nexar already, and I think we'll see it even more strongly with Platform API because that's even bigger and better and kind of covers more capabilities.
Yeah, I mean, I see this kind of generation of like third-party services just kind of springing up quickly because the fact that you can just do what you want to do through an API, that's really superior to kind of the old model that I think the EDA or ECAD software industry ran on for a while, which was like you had to actually contact the company and convince them to help you, and maybe they would help you, and maybe they would tell you to bug off, right? And so if you were lucky, you could build something on top of an existing application, and you probably had to show up from a big name company to get their attention. And now it's just like, hey, come on in and sign up and start building stuff.
I'm a strong believer in API first design. So when you come up with new capabilities, our managed bomb tool, for example, have it as an API. It keeps your separation from your business logic and your client. And if you get your API, your interface right, you've got a clean system to start with that your own UI, your own interfaces can sit on top of. And that separation is natural. And then customers, the first question they say is, this looks great in the UI. How do I access the same data programmatically because I want to connect it into my systems? And you've got an answer there. So yeah, API first is definitely a thing. And I would say that on top of that, we're now in an AI world. We're now in a world where it's important that your APIs are discoverable not just by humans but by machines. And those LLMs that come in and talk to us via MCP servers, they want to know the kind of questions that humans want to ask, but they do this automatically. So it's imperative, I think, to stay to provide an API that is consumable by all sorts of clients.
Yeah, we're 18 minutes in, and it took that long to mention AI and MCP and LLMs and that kind of thing. So that's a good indicator of where we're at in the AI hype cycle. But I agree with you that this kind of approach to building a platform is really necessary if you want to build those AI tools on top of it. I know some folks before this was a thing who were basically going through and like trying to decode the Altium binaries in order to do anything to an Altium design, which is crazy to me. It's why should it be like that?
We can do better than that nowadays, but yeah, I've heard a few tales similar to this, and I think some people do it because they can, but it was the only way that they could as well, which motivates you. So, yeah. I guess maybe it's time for me to show a demo of some of the APIs, Zach. So
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going to go next. Yeah, if you could make this a little more tangible for viewers, and if anyone is listening on audio right now, please head over to the YouTube channel, head over to Altium Academy, and tune into this episode if you want to see this demo in action. So, Rob, as you get this loaded up, maybe if you could just tell us what we're going to be watching here.
Yeah, so I'll give a couple of demos. I'll run some queries. Well, first of all, we'll look at the schemas. So today we have separate schemas for the Nexar API and Platform API. The direction is very much towards Platform API. But in order to access supply data, I need to show you the Nexar API today. So I'll show you the schema. We'll talk through how objects are connected, perhaps. And then I'll go and give a demo of actually running a query so you can see the data live. And then we can switch to the Platform API and see a similar thing for design. And then I want, to talk about the federated model and the growth that's happened to give a real flavor for the investment that's happening within the company and the direction of travel. So let me hop into the supply API first. So this is our Nexar API schema. For those not familiar with GraphQL, it's a dynamic open source data query and manipulation language. It was released by Facebook in 2015. And what it allows you to do is pick and choose the data that you want to query, and it will only return that data. So this is then much more efficient. And if you are Facebook returning friends of friends of friends, it's kind of the only way to practically deliver, the answer to your query. So GraphQL has queries, which are kind of gets, and mutations, which are then edits. If you're going to create an object or update it or delete it, you would do that with a mutation. But having a look here, you can see that we've got a number of queries. The Nexar API has something like 147 queries today, 116 mutations. And I'm just going to focus on the supply side of things here. So the supply side is really a reflection on what you see on Octopart today. So you can connect in, you can make a parts query, you can give us some identifiers, or a lot of people do a search NPN. So you may have an NPN that you have in mind and you want to go and find information about it. So you make your query and you'll get, as I'll show in a minute, a supply part. So this, I think, is kind of the main, I think of this as the main object type to do with the supply world. And your part here has an identifier, it has a name, it has an NPN. We know who the manufacturer is, and you can get information about the manufacturer's homepage or the name of the manufacturer. It has technical specifications, and I'll show that quickly in the demo. You've also got things like data sheets, CAD files, and also procurement information like availability and offers. So let me trickle down into a seller. So these are sellers that are selling this part right now. So, this is the magic source of Octopart is, it knows who's selling these parts today, and it knows what kind of prices are there for. And this is all then available through the API. So you come in here, you've got your seller. Again, it's a company, so you can find out about it. And you have these things called offers. So I'll just quickly trickle through the offers here. And an offer will say this is a minimum order of quantity. This click URL will take you directly to the distributor site. What's your expected lead time? And then what are your price points here? So your pricing is then broken down by particular price points, how much to buy one of these parts, how much to buy 10, how much to buy 1,000. And that's all reflected in this kind of model in this GraphQL.
Yeah, this is an area that I'm totally unfamiliar with, but I think you've explained it well, kind of what all these different pieces are. So you really have these kind of hierarchical or parent-child relationships between all of the different things that you can pull out of the API, essentially.
Yeah, that's right, and that's why it's GraphQL, because it really embraces that parent-child relationship. And if you think about it from the supply chain side, that makes sense, but it also makes sense from a kind of A365 from the design side. You've got a workspace that has got child projects. Those projects have got designs, have got PCBs, and you've got this whole kind of hierarchy that makes sense to be expressed as a graph. So things work quite well. All right, so now I've hopped into this IDE. It's called Nitro. It's free to download. And I've connected into the API. So I can build up this interactive query now. So this is really where GraphQL shines. You haven't got a fixed query that you're asking for to get a fixed amount of data back. You can choose as a client what you're asking for. So here I've got an NPN I'm searching for. It's from the Renesas RA family, RAOE2 of MCU. So I think it's a 2024 low energy MCU part that I've found here. So I can run this query, and straight away I'm getting how many hits I've got. Okay, I've found the part. What's the NPN? What's the name? And I'm looking into tech specs here. So if I'm looking for, say, compliance here, I can search for a tech spec with RoHS. I can try that again, typing properly. Oops. There we go. And you can see that for this part, we all are compliant. So the system knows that this part has got some attributes. It's been flagged as RoHS compliant, and you can get that confirmation through the API directly. What I also wanted to show here is that, there are other things as well. So if I look at best data sheet, so the number of data sheets associated with parts, and Octopart has an algorithm for kind of computing the best one. But what I'm doing here is I am interacting with the system. It knows the schema, it knows what fields are available, and I can pick and choose which parts of the API and which data I want to return for data sheets. So I can do this interactively, or there's a little builder here, an operation builder. And if I click this parent here, there we go. I can see what data I'm allowed to access here. So maybe I add a created at field as well. And now when I run the query again, let's close the builder. Then I've got that information. This data sheet was created in November. There's a link to the PDF file, and there's its name. So you can feel I hope the sense of power of this GraphQL, and giving you exactly what you want as a client.
So you can basically keep adding in these like sub parts of the query, if you will, to pull out just precisely the information that you want, rather than getting this huge data dump with all the possible child steps, I guess you could say, in that broad schema that defines the API. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly, because I'm not a software developer.
Terminology is great. That's absolutely right. You can, if you wanted to get everything. Now, there's obviously problems in kind of, returning all of the specs of all the parts that Octopart has. It's got 95 million parts. So that's obviously going to, time out before you do that. So you have to be kind of smart about how you filter. And when I come on to show the platform API, I'll show you how some of that filtering can apply, not just at the top level, but kind of halfway down the graph as well. So yeah, that's a power of this capability, I think. All right, the last supply query I was going to run very quickly here is this availability and pricing query. So, we get a lot of people that are interested in live availability and pricing. They need to procure these parts. They need to make sure they're within budget, and they care very, very much about kind of getting this data. So those of you on the YouTube channel, I guess, can see that this is building up. Again, it's doing a multi-match query. So in this case, I'm using variables from GraphQL. I'm passing in our part that we've just talked about, but a few others as well here. So, some people use this as kind of almost like BOM fulfillment. You're looking at getting data for your bill of materials by passing into this particular query.
So real quick, so inside that list, right, it looked like you had 4 different MPNs. So this is almost like an example with, you have each entry in the BOM, right? So each of these could be a BOM line item, let's say.
Yeah, exactly. And, the idea between the multi-match was it was an early BOM resolver. We have like more sophisticated tools, I think, at the moment. But yeah, this takes up to 100 parts. You can supply an NPN or an SKU if you know your stock keeping unit instead, and then you can send that to the server, and that will be resolved. So that's exactly what we've done here.
So for BOM resolver, this would be for those folks who, and I always, in design reviews tell people to stop doing this, but this would be for those folks that just like to use generic descriptions for a lot of their parts instead of picking a specific part number.
At this level, I think it's more the specific part. So you're expected to have identified a part, or at least, you're doing a match on something that you're saying is there. So if you're, stepping back a level and you're saying this is like a placeholder and it could be fulfilled by a number of different, alternate parts, for example, this maybe isn't quite the query. There are other tools that we provide in terms of like the managed BOM, for example, for doing that. But this is a little bit lower level than that, I think.
Sure. Okay.
But yeah, here's our part again. So I'm just going to quickly show that, we've got 237 are in stock from the seller, who happens to be also Renesas as well as the manufacturer. You get partners like that. And also the pricing here. So if I was to buy one, it would be just over $2, whereas if I was to buy 10, it would be, $1.50 and et cetera. And you get a discount the more you buy, as you would expect. So that's the kind of pricing side of things. I did want to show a little subtlety here. So let's have a look. In the second part, here we go. I'm filtering for authorized only sellers here. So I'm only interested in offers from sellers that are authorized by the manufacturer to sell. So in the second example, this MPN here, there isn't any availability, and we want no sellers here because of this limitation. So I might decide that I want to change that rule here. So I'm adding now a flag saying authorized only is false. I'm doing this at the level here. It's not coming in at the top. It applies to sellers. And so it makes sense to have this filter at the sellers level. So now if I run this query and I jump again to the second part, here we go. So now we've got a seller, in this case Quest. They're not authorized, but any offers that they would have are now included in the output. And I've controlled that through this gate, through this kind of filtering at this level.
Okay, so this is really interesting, and you have kind of a way to look at different pieces of information in the BOM in different ways. Ultimately getting down to specific parts as well as inventory pricing, kind of all of those things that you would need for procurement. So I can imagine some different types of apps, possibly even AI enabled, that could leverage all this data. And ultimately the user is just going to make a decision based on this data and ultimately make purchases.
Absolutely. And, we have internal tools, and we have partners that do things like looking at, and they're tracking kind of, pricing history and looking at inventory history. And they're trying to make smart decisions about, well, what do I buy and when do I buy it, based on their input parameters. So this whole kind of procurement world is supported through the backbone of this API, for sure.
Okay, very cool.
All right, shall we hop to Platform API and look at some design now? Because I know a lot of your viewers and listeners are more into the PCB side of things.
Yeah, that's a perfect transition for sure. So we've talked about supply so far. Once again, if anyone's listening on audio, please head over to YouTube and watch this demo on the Platform API. So go ahead and jump right in and show us what you got.
Cool. Okay, thanks. So this is now the Platform API. You can see it's, I hope you can see just from the overview, it's a lot bigger. If I zoom right out, you can see it's got a huge number of types that are all interconnected. So it's, we're up in space at this point looking at this. And let me just show you this, why that's the case. We talked about the timeline, and we talked about how this development and investment has gone. So, this blue stuff was Roman's initial design, but when we connected it into the platform, and when we started pushing for kind of a federated model where different groups would be expected to join the platform and contribute to it, you get to see this real acceleration. So we're now at the point, I think today we're on sort of 26 separate teams and separate services that are contributing to this overall schema. And you can just see how it's accelerating away. And I would expect that to continue. A lot of these guys are providing API, which they're consuming themselves. One service can consume Platform API from another service and kind of build on top of it. So that investment is... it's absolutely real. It's happening inside, and it's going to benefit customers and partners as well as ourselves. So yeah, let's zoom into the design world again. There are a number of other domains that are supported in these 26, but let's focus on design. So again, it's quite a rich API. There are a number of queries, a number of mutations. Here, I think there's something like almost 200 queries and about 230 mutations in the platform API today. And where anyone who works with A365 will know that you log into a workspace. So a workspace is reflected in this model here. You can actually query for a list of workspaces, or typically your workspace URL or your ID. So you're getting your workspace. We've got metadata about that workspace. So here's your library. This will take you off to your component library or your reuse template library. And down here, you've got workflows, you've got tasks. You can look at your team and manage your team nowadays. And somewhere around here is your projects. So this is then going to go a little bit deeper into projects. So a design project here will, again, there's metadata about that design. You're looking at, who owns this, who last modified it, are there specific versions, are there collaboration releases if you're kind of interchanging data. Parameters are a bit like the specs, obviously, that we saw. So this is keyword value pairs that you can control and access programmatically. And again, you have kind of project level tasks as well. So let's dig into the design itself. We're in a really sort of, I think, entering kind of proper engineering territory, I think, at this point. So design has releases and variants. I'll go down the variants path here. And a design variant will have a BOM. You can have different BOMs, different schematics for your different variants. And then this is the object for your PCB itself. And let's have a look at your PCB. And as you would expect, then everything related to a PCB is available via the API. So you're looking at net, you're looking at your pads and your tracks. And I'm going to go down the layer stack route. Just it's a few extra hops, but you'll see why when I make the query in a moment. So I'm looking at individual layers within my layer stack, and I've found a layer now, and a layer will have a net associated with it, which is connected here, and your net will have tracks, and your tracks have a beginning point and an end point. So by following this flow, we've gone from your top level workspaces, you've logged in, your organization has logged in, we've gone through projects, designs, PCBs, layers, nets, tracks, and we're now finding a specific start point of a specific track. So this is really how rich this data model is, and it allows you to get this programmatic access to that level of detail in your design world.
Yeah, you're getting all the way down to the it looks like the XY coordinates exactly for the position of this object, in this case a track.
Absolutely, yeah.
So yeah, you really do get into the nuts and bolts.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm not saying all gaps are closed here, by the way. I mean, this is obviously a massive challenge. So, there will be some bits that are missing, and, we're very much open to listening to what customers need and then kind of reacting to close those gaps. We want business outcomes here, as well as a nice clean schema. So yeah, let me run a couple of queries and just show what that looks like in real life then. So I'm running this first top query here. And it's I know my workspace URL, so I've come in here. I've put a little query filter like we talked about in the supply world. So I'm only including projects that names contain FMU, and it's found my CAIM flight management unit project here. I've got an ID. So let me talk about grids very briefly. So a grid is a global resource ID, and that will correspond to an entity in our common data model. So if something is important enough that it's something that you might want to persist a reference to, you can hold on to this ID, and then you can plug it into a query in the future and go back to exactly that. So there are some properties of these things called entities, which means they can be identified, and this reference you'd expect to be persistent. So these are pervasive across the API, and we encourage users to use this, because on the back end, then it's much easier and quicker and more efficient for us to look up these parts. So if I hop into the second query, I'm taking that project ID that I've returned here for this project, and I'm going to run this query. So I won't go through all the details again, but this is the same path that we just navigated. We're going through PCB, through the layer stack to a particular beginning and end point of a track. And if I run that query, you can see there's your data. So already we've got this kind of rich information that's available. You can use that for your analysis, whatever you want to do. Is this within a boundary of your design? I think one more thing I wanted to point out is I mentioned.
Sorry, real quick, yeah, before that. So you have in the list of tracks that get returned. There's multiple begin values. So this is basically tracing all of the different track sections in that net.
It's an array of tracks. So you can tell from the square bracket that it's returning an array of tracks. So yes, you're right. Each one will have a beginning point and an end point, and they're returned together. So I could ask for more information about a track if I wanted. Is there a layer? Is there parameters about it? What's the width? I was surprised there isn't a name on a track here, but you can imagine that by connecting into it, you know where that track is and which part of your PCB that you're interested in. So you can work out the context from the kind of parent hierarchy as well. But yeah, that's a good question. So if I close layer stack, I just wanted to show you design items. I'm listing also in the same query design items. So as well as tracks, I'm getting design item information back as well. And I've got a more sophisticated filter here. So a design item is a member of a layer, and a layer has a name. And I can apply this kind of smart filtering up here, which is just limiting to a particular name of a particular layer for design items. So if I then comment that out, and return all design items, then rather than seeing 30 with everything at top, what you should see is all of those design items. So, close the layer stack again, and then we go 102, and we bring in everything back. So again, it shows the dynamic nature of GraphQL and the capabilities that it offers. All right, last query, if I just move on to that, or second last query, I suppose. So the library component. So I mentioned before, what we've seen is there's a lot of interest in partners and customers wanting to manage their libraries programmatically, and that's where this kind of library management API call comes from. It's paged in this case. So if I run this query, I've got a total of 700 components in this library. But I'm only getting the first 10 back. So I'm also going to get a cursor that's telling me the end of these. This is like the bookmark. I can plug that cursor in the next query, and I can get the next 10. So this is set up, for example, if you then integrate this query with a UI program where you can just go to the next page or jump to the fifth page if you wanted to, and you can get your component library kind of paged and passed that way. And again, components have these grids. They are considered first-class entities in our platform. So you can take your component ID and you can thrust it into a component by ID lookup, and then you can get more specific information about that component. So in this case, I've run the query. I found its lifecycle is in draft, but I wanted to point out that in terms of the manufacturer parts that fulfill that component, we've also got an ID here. So what I could do is I could plug that back into the supply parts API, and I can get all that supply data for this part. So your availability, your tech specs, and your pricing is all kind of can be connected.
Yeah, there's a lot here, and it's really cool that you can get all of this information just out of the API without having to download everything to your desktop, write maybe a customized Python API or something like that. I know there are some folks who have been doing that on an open source basis to kind of help people build. But I think the real power of being able to get all of this information out of the cloud is pretty significant.
Oh, I think it's a game changer. And I think Lee and the Altium leadership saw this in 2020, and that's where the investment into this platform came and started from. So, yeah, it's now at the point where it's becoming real, and that's really exciting for me, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're getting up here on time, but I think I'd like to know, and viewers would like to know, what's next. What's next? What can they get access now? Is this something that's going to be rolling out soon?
Okay, we can wrap up now. So yeah, I think this is it's available in a closed beta today. I think it's really exciting. I think the thing that probably excites me the most, Zach, is it's not just like the known unknowns. We know there are companies out there that are building AI and ML. We know we're going to do this ourselves. We know it's going to open up a whole new avenue for solutions and products. But it's what we don't know. If we make this platform available, if we make it smart enough and discoverable and rich enough, it's the stuff that we can't imagine yet that this is going to unlock. And that to me is really exciting.
Well, that's why it's so smart to do this through an API and open it up to external developers rather than keeping it proprietary, like I think would be the old, legacy business model for CAD, because you never know what someone else is going to come in and build. And that's going to be the thing that just, adds the zero to your revenue, but you never know what it is. And, you can't always rely on doing the investment internally to build that thing.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. This is the direction of the industry and many other industries. And, I'm pretty proud that Altium is a trailblazer here. It's kind of leading the way for sure.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you so much for being with us today, Rob.
What a pleasure talking to you. Thanks very much for your time and this opportunity, Zach. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as all this stuff rolls out and there's cool new stuff that people are doing and there's new features built into the developer site and into the API, we'd love to have you come back on and talk about it.
That would be a pleasure in the future too. So who knows what that will look like, but
absolutely. Thank you so much. To everyone that's out there listening, we've been talking with Rob Barton, Head of Platform API at Altium. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. You'll be able to keep up with all of our podcast episodes and tutorials as they come out. And last but not least, don't stop learning, stay on track, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.